the hotel thing. So even if you have to pay hotel stuff, Thailand's like miles cheaper than Hong Kong.
Yeah, for sure. And it's a lot more relaxing. You go for massages, you can eat like food. It's street food is amazing. I'm not that Hong Kong isn't, but it's just so much more expensive.
That's right.
Yeah.
Christine's been on holiday, everybody. Been on holiday.
Yeah. Unheard of. In the last 3.5, actually nearly 4 years since I played that quantum motion.
Yeah, that's it. Slaving away, building quantum computing, and decided actually needed a massage in Bangkok as the only
Signs
solution.
of a growing team, though, you know, like I can actually relax. Actually, was still checking my emails for like 2 days, and I was like, you know what? Like, I've got a team now. It'll be
Yeah.
okay.
Do you have minions? Do you have people like
No,
you know?
barely,
Get
barely.
yourself a minion or two. You know, they help. You know, some little gopher in the office. Perfect.
Yeah,
Anyway, we're live, everybody. Welcome to Brainfood Live on Air, bringing it to you every Friday, no fail. It's episode 309, and this is an episode by popular demand. In fact, this is actually one of the episodes that wouldn't have happened without community insistence. I forget who it was. It might have been one of our guests, actually. It might have been Teddy, who said, "Hung, do a chief of staff show." And I thought, you know what? I actually don't know what a chief of staff is, and maybe I should do a show on that. So that is the topic of the day: chief of staff, or WTF. What is this role? And can TAHR do it? Is it a possible pathway for people in the people business? It seems like it should be. It says chief of staff, right? But I found that actually it's quite an unusual job. It seems to appear in government. It seems to appear in the military. It might have come from that type of area. What is it? What is it? How is it different? How does it overlap? What skills are needed? That is what we're going to be talking about today. Anyway, let's do some sound checks before we before we go any further forward. Folks, if you're watching this on Crowdcast, do let me know whether the audio is fine. Just let me know in the comments whether you can hear and see myself and Christine okay. Now we should be blasting this out on LinkedIn as well. So if you see, actually I see myself on LinkedIn, which is a positive sign. If you're watching this on my LinkedIn or Rob's LinkedIn, and the audio is fine, just drop us a comment there to make sure that's okay as well. And then we should be ready to go. No. I think we're okay. Good. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, everybody. Okay, great. Let's crack on. What do we need to do? We need to thank our sponsors, folks. Without our sponsors, Brainfood Live cannot continue. Every week, a company steps up and says, "Look, we're going to help you keep this show on the road." And this week, it is one of our hopefully soon regular sponsors, one of the most popular ATS solutions out there in the market, come out of nowhere, but they've been really popular for a period of time where you find very little negative commentary about this company. Team Taylor, folks, really interesting product, I believe out of Scandinavia. But why? I don't need to say too much about it. Let's bring on Richard. He can talk to us about Team Taylor and why you as recruiters need to care about it. So Richard, I've just invited you on stage. Let's come and say hi.
Hey, good afternoon. Hey, everyone.
Oh, Richard, compliments firstly on that wicked shirt, mate. That's banging.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I've got to admit, since COVID, I haven't been able to whip it out too much. So this is pretty good.
Now is the time. Have you informed the authorities, mate? Because I'm not sure people can handle that shirt.
Sound more and more like my fiance, I tell you.
That's great. Richard pinged me earlier today, saying, "Hung, I can't make it," and now I know why. He's like going to be clubbing at 3 p.m. or something, isn't he? That's what he said.
It's bank holiday weekend, Hung.
That's it. Richard, why don't you quickly introduce yourself? Who are you? What is you do, mate?
Yeah, sure, no problem. So yeah, I'm part of the UK team at Team Taylor. I'm a senior account executive as part of the UK team.
Fantastic stuff. And Team Taylor, I mean, I did mention just earlier about what this product is and, why people should care about it. But, it's very difficult to compete, battling away with like 101 ATS solutions and what have you. How do you distinguish Team Taylor when you're speaking to customers and prospects and stuff? Like, what are the distinguishing features of the solution that people need to know about?
It's always difficult to say when it comes to an ATS, because I think when a lot of people look into ATSs, they see the features, they see that they can do things which are quite similar. So what I'd probably actually say more so is it's the company. We built ourselves on the principle that we want to make recruitment fun for users. We want to try and revolutionize the way that companies are attracting and also hiring talent. So, now we've kind of gone into 2025, we've seen our vision really sort of come to life. So Team Taylor is being used at the moment. One of the big differences between us and others, We've been used to hire 845,000 people since we kicked off in 2013, which is absolutely huge. We've got 185,000 recruiters who are using us. We're trusted by 11,000 companies. We're being used around the globe at the moment. And, we've achieved all of this really, I would say, by keeping the dream alive. Throughout the development, we've tried to create this industry-leading sort of employer branding capability combined with a powerful, a kind of intuitive, very easily adoptable, easy to use ATS, which ultimately can be used by anyone. Kind of linking into your episode here, it can be used by hiring managers, TA directors, but also chief of staff, either from a computer or from a phone. And really, I'd say the way that we've kind of gone about this is we are an all-in-one ATS, as you mentioned at the beginning, but at the heart, we're trying to help create things like career sites which can convert. This is a super important thing. Efficient recruitment workflows powered by AI and also by automations, but also just the incredible candidate experience. I think this is the thing which often gets missed out by ATSs. It's not just about the workflows from recruiters. The candidate experience is crucial. This is one of the things I would say. So, I mean, just to name a few, we're used by brands like Oatly, by Nauf, Food Asylum, Five Guys. If anyone likes burgers here, Five Guys, Astrid and Mayu as well. They all trust Team Taylor to power the employer brand, provide a great experience, and most importantly, it allows the recruitment team and the hiring managers to maximize the results from their time. I mean, if you don't mind, Hung, I've got an example which I'd love to share with you if you've got the time. So, David Nottage, he's the head of talent attraction at Food Asylum. Food Asylum is a huge company for us in the UK. They've got 65 stores, 2,500 employees. They're not the biggest. We've got 120,000 employee retailer as well, but they're certainly one of the bigger ones in the UK. They came to us because they were struggling to attract the right quality of candidates. And this was really kind of an all-in-one solution that we needed to provide. Due to the limitations of the tools that they were using at the time, the candidates they were attracting were having a very poor experience. They had very limited feedback, both on the applications and also on the interview process. And in brief, it's not where they wanted the candidate experience to be. In fact, we were actually told by David specifically, he said, I wanted something where I could go to the career site, make changes fast, respond to trends, make it feel like us. And we're very happy to say, obviously, when he started using Team Taylor, he got back in contact with us. They built out the career site, they kind of streamlined the process. They started immediately within the first year of saving £130,000 on agency costs. They reduced the time to hire to 14 days. Wow. Most impressively, this is something which always gets overlooked. This is what I go back to with the candidate experience. 30% of rejected candidates came back and reapplied through the Connect functionality, which is basically the candidate talent pool of Team Taylor, with their details because the experience was that good. So if I kind of had to summarize it, I suppose from a feature perspective, just going back to your original question there, from a content perspective, there's no devs needed. You can change content, branding, video layout instantly using the drag and drop site builder. That's a big one. We can summarize CVs, create personalized feedback and rejection emails, generate job-specific application questions, sift through the talent pool. We can do all of this with AI and automation, only where it brings value. I think it's worth noting, we're not trying to replace your voice. We're trying to amplify it using AI and automation. We can fast track the retail hiring, personalize the candidate journey, reduce the admin with trigger-based workflows. We know most of the candidates applying as well are applying with their phone, with a coffee in one hand, or depending on the time of the day, something a bit stronger. So we've tried to make it a little bit more mobile first as well in terms of its design. And we measure the conversion rates for drop-off points for engagement so that you can continuously improve with a comprehensive analytics module and a powerful reporting tool. Just as kind of a final point here as well, Food Asylum is obviously the one which stands out to me, but also Astrid and Mayu, they work in the retail hospitality space. Mm-hmm. They use Team Taylor to let their people tell their stories. So they've got things like day in the life videos, real voices, real jobs, real vibes. Because today's candidates, especially Gen Z, I will say, today's candidates can spot an inauthentic branding experience from a mile away. The best career sites, they're not trying to sell you a dream. They're helping you to imagine where you might belong. And that's what we believe. The recruitment marketing should be transparent. It should be inclusive. Ultimately, it should be alive. This is kind of how we see it. So again, any of this resonates, obviously, if you're thinking maybe AI can help me get the most out of my talent pool, the candidate experience might be able to be a little bit better. Obviously, just hit me up. I'm going to be on the call for the rest of the time. Send me a LinkedIn message. But otherwise, I'm just looking forward to hearing you guys talk about the panel. It's a really interesting topic, chief of staff role. And enjoy the show, everyone.
Thank you very much, Richard. Wonderful monologue, by the way. I love that entire pitch. It was fantastic. And it really does kind of capture the differentiation I think you offer the business. I can see the mobile first experience. That obviously makes it it makes sense then to understand that a lot of your customers are actually B2C, big B2C type retailers, because a lot of the staff that they hire are going to be mobile first type candidates. And that is kind of educated me a great deal on what that is. So fantastic stuff, Richard. Thank you very much. I've shared Richard's link on the sort of the chat stream. Make sure you connect with him. I've also shared probably the world's largest UTM link in Crowdcast. I didn't mean to do that, but that's the only thing I got off the internet. So you can click on that and check out Team Taylor. Okay, Rich, thanks a lot. Hang on with the rest of the call. I hope you enjoy the rest of the show. Okay, wonderful stuff. Let's crack through. Christine, let's do a quick review of the newsletter from last week. Did you read it real quick? And if so, what was interesting?
Oh, I mean,
you're on holiday though. You probably didn't read it, did you? That's fine.
Well, I read it when I got back. I got back on Sunday. But I can spend a whole hour talking about this. But obviously, it's an immigration white paper that's come out, and it's been just taking over everyone that's in HR or working closely with immigration, global talent. So for anyone that's not in the UK, what is it? So if some of you may remember Brexit. So post-Brexit, taking back control was a lot of the key statements that the government was pushing for. So it's finally happened. A white paper has come out last week, and it's literally titled "Restoring Control Over the Immigration System." Me, myself, I've been in the UK for over 12 years, been over 4 visas. I've got my ILR 2 years ago. That means indefinite leave to remain. I'm now British. So I know what it's like on the other side. But now that as an employer, we're monitoring this frequently. 20% of my team are on visas. And it's just not made things easier for us at all. So thinking about it, I suppose from a population growth perspective, right? The 1960s, we had like maybe 200,000 migrants. Since then, year on year, but over the last year, I think 1.4 million visas were issued. So there's been a main focus on where the visa's going. A lot of it, and looking at the numbers and doing a deep dive, really actually 500,000 of it has gone to students and their dependents. And if we look at it from a wider perspective, there's over 1 million vacancies here in the UK across so many different sectors, right? And economically, I think you look at it, in the care system, there's a lot of roles there where they don't actually even fit the minimum salary requirement. And like I said, I can rant about this for ages, but what is this meant to support, right, in the longer term? From my perspective, in tech, hopefully it's going to make things easier for us to hire specialist niche researchers, which is what they say they're going to do. But the costs have gone up significantly already, and they're now saying that they're going to increase it by another 30%. So the operating cost for a business is going to continue growing. So I don't see how it's going to make things attractive for companies to start innovating here, to be honest. And that's how I feel right now.
Yeah, anti-immigration folks, politically essential in democracies today. If you're not banging on about the immigrants, you're not going to get into political power. So yeah, this is obviously uncomfortable listening to anybody who is an immigrant, which of course I'm a multiple immigrant in every country. I'm an immigrant, and yeah, it's really bad news. I mean, we've got a massive healthcare recruitment crisis anyway, with a shortfall of something 100,000 sort of healthcare workers. Now it's going to make it even harder to recruit those people in. And there's all this talk about, we're going to retrain people. It never happens.
Yeah, it's prioritizing domestic workers, right? And you go, well, what are the key areas? And you look at temporary workers. What are the lower skilled migration roles, right? They say fruit pickers, poultry workers, food preparation, hospitality. But there's also a minimum salary threshold. How does that work?
I met with a former minister of work and pensions earlier this week, and she told me there was 9 million unemployed or underemployed people already here in the UK. So there's 9 million people that are already unemployed or underemployed. We can't fit them into these jobs either through lack of training or the jobs are not located where they're living, et cetera, which is why there's this pressure to bring people from outside in. And it's going to take a lot of work to try and transform that group of people into your healthcare workers or into your medical professionals or wherever it is that we think that we need. So yeah, anyway, world of recruiting has got harder, but on the silver lining is that the demand for recruiters should actually increase, because
That's true.
hiring people just got harder. Therefore, there should be more recruitment work, right? So silver lining on what is a steaming pile of whatever. Okay, let's give us one more before we get on with the show, Christine, because we've got to do the chief of staff thing. So give us one more.
I would say the Microsoft cuts was an interesting one. So I think what it was they cut 3%. They laid off 3% of their population. That was at 6,000 staff, mainly tenured people who've been there for over 20 years. So I think what the big uproar was people who were massive contributors to some of the biggest projects internally. And really pondering on that, it's quite a symptom, right, in a large company where, in one of my previous companies, they were rethinking how to introduce new skills and new talent in the workplace, but you're limited because of the headcount that you have, right? How do you address it? Do you address it by integration, peer-led learning, reverse mentoring? But if also they've been there for over 20 years and they're senior, it's possible that it's also run its course, right? Like they know where they stand. They don't want to, learn new skills. They're senior enough to continue pushing on new projects. But from an HR perspective, the operating cost of a layer of individuals who are loyal, they're costing what, 600K? I think that's what their salaries were. What's the cost benefit of keeping a layer of managers who are literally maybe running programs at that point, and they're not necessarily rolling their sleeves up and actually, doing the work, right? So do you then actually hire people who are at six the price, who are hands-on, and more kind of in line with what's going on, externally? So you look at managed attrition, and I think that's what's happened here. And what we're seeing is more the disgruntled employees going, well, actually, why are we being laid off? But really, I would say it's a transformation that's come out, and that's the way I'm seeing it. But 600K, right, at that level, it's a lot.
It is. There's a lot of people that are earning a lot of money, and I'm not the one to tell Microsoft how to allocate their budget, but the reality of it is, some brutal cuts are happening. I think it's going to continue to happen, right? There's not a fixed state where companies are going to say, oh, now we've got the right size. Because the reality is, as artificial intelligence continues to kind of iterate and continues to change what can be done, no one knows how to right size a business anymore, which means that things are just going to get smaller, unfortunately. So there we have it. Anyway, let's crack on with the show. Let's talk about Chief of Staff. Christine, do you know anything about this? And if so, can you give us just a bit of an overview? Like, what's your view of this?
To be honest, the first time I've experienced it was when Yieldify, my first startup I was at. We had a chief of staff, Guy, if he's ever listening to this. He was actually brought on to support our CEO. So we were post Series A fundraise. Our CEO was extremely busy trying to keep, the board happy. At the same time, we were doubling our hires, and he just couldn't really manage everything on a day-to-day. So the best way we put it was kind of like a glorified assistant role to our CEO, but he was signing everything off that our CEO obviously couldn't on a day-to-day. But it's a very strategic position, and I remember us going, if we couldn't get a final answer from our CEO, we just go to Guy at the time, and that was kind of my first foray into it. But I don't really see many chief of staff. So Alex, who's on the show here today as well, I met her last year through a friend, and she kind of mentioned that she came in from the TA journey. So I thought, wow, that wasn't actually necessarily a career path, I think, as a TA professional I considered. So it's interesting to hear that there, from my perspective, I always thought it was always from a strategic or operational perspective, never really from a TA and HR. So I think it's a great topic, as a lot of people in industry are also considering what our moves are and what does it look like next. It's good to know Chief of Staff is on the cards. So looking forward to hearing from everyone here today.
Let's hear from it. Folks, if you're watching this on Crowdcast, let me direct you to the right-hand side of the sort of column there. There's a poll, which I'm going to ask you to fill in. Question's very simple. Have you ever been in an organization that has a chief of staff role? Yes, no. Let us know your votes on that, folks. Okay, let's bring some chiefs of staff on. I mean, what is the plural of chief of staff? But we've got a bunch of these guys,
yes,
and girls, as a matter of fact, and they're going to tell us all about it. So here we go. Let's see if they're around. We have Ben, we have Evan. Let's hope Alex is here as well. There she is. And we also have Teddy. I think Teddy was the one that actually started this. So he's put himself as NA. I think that's Teddy. Right. NA is coming in.
Yeah.
It's high risk when someone has decided to anonymize themselves as not available. But I think that's him. So we'll see how we go. I think Chief of Staff.
He's here.
I think he's there. It's him. Oh, here we go. We have some people here. Great stuff. I think we've got the right people. Teddy, great to see you. Why don't we kick off with you? Can you quickly introduce yourself? Who are you? What it is you do, Teddy?
Yeah. Hey, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes. Go ahead.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah. So I'm Teddy. Right now, I'm the head of growth actually at a startup called Autoblocks, which is a AI applications development platform, basically, that helps you launch and ship AI applications with confidence. But for the last 2 years before joining Autoblocks, I was chief of staff at MoonHub, which is actually an AI startup, essentially launching a recruiting agent. I'm not sure if folks have heard of it, but it's kind of an up and coming HR tech startup. So yeah, super excited to be on here and to talk with you, Hung and Christine, and then talk to all these other chief of staff.
Fantastic. And Teddy, you are responsible for this. I think it was you that did email me and say, yeah, let's do this show. So, if this bombs, this is on you, man.
Yeah, no, I know. You put a blast out about talking about it, and I said, I'm happy to talk about it. So, I hope it's successful. But it looks like we have a lot of people on so far, so I'm excited.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, great stuff. Thank you very much. I've just shared Teddy's LinkedIn in the chat stream there. Evan, great to see you. Can you quickly introduce yourself? Who are you? What it is you do?
Yes, hi all, and thanks for having me on. Is the sound all right?
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
Brilliant. Also, Hung, thanks for the recruiting Brainfood. I think I'm on 5-6 years subscriber. Always great stuff. But yeah, I'm a chief of staff for product and tech parts of Pleo. We're originally Danish fintech operating across Europe, spend management and soon cash management solution. Yeah, I am, I think, a bit of a niche version of a chief of staff supporting not the entire leadership team, nor directly CEO, but rather chief product officer and chief technology officer in my case. If anything, happy to be with my product folk.
Yeah, fantastic stuff. And Alex, great to see you, Alex. Can you quickly introduce yourself, who are you, what it is you do?
Absolutely. I'm Alex. I'm originally from New Zealand, which explains the funky accent, and I'm currently the Chief of Staff at a Series A climate tech startup. So what we're building is an AI platform to really speed up the development of linear infrastructure. Think green energy, renewables, offshore wind. So yeah, really using tech for good. Before this, like many of you listening, I worked in people and talent roles, scaling startups in North America and Oz. But as of right now, I'm on maternity leave. I had a baby 4 months ago, so I got to give a shout out of gratitude to my friend Christine and host for dragging me out of the, trenches of motherhood for today's chat. But I am very bullish on the chief of staff role. So very excited to talk to all of you about why I think that is.
Great stuff. Firstly, Alex, I didn't realize, but many congratulations on the family. That's fantastic news. Good stuff. And we have Craig as well. Craig, wonderful. Ben, great to see you, sir. I hope you're all right. Can you quickly introduce yourself? Who are you? What it is you do, sir?
Yeah, so my name's Ben. So I've helped companies such as Miro and Wise to navigate global expansion, and this covers everything from how they hire to optimizing their ways of working. I've primarily done this as head of recruiting and employer brand, and over the past year, I've been chief of staff for the chief people officer at Miro.
Fantastic stuff. Let's kick it off with a very quick overview, high level. What is chief of staff? In fact, what is the history of chief of staff? Does anybody know where this role emerged from? Can we learn anything from the history of it? Does anybody know? Let's kick it off there. What's the roots of this?
So my understanding, and I don't know if everyone else has an understanding, my understanding is it actually came from the US president, who typically has a chief of staff within his office. They typically manage access to the president. There was a whole McKinsey article a few years ago that I saw about it, which talked about chief of staffs actually within the White House and the different kind of archetypes of those people. So my understanding is that's where it first came from. And then from there, it kind of developed into kind of corporations, and different people started leveraging them. But it really actually originally started from the US White House. That is my understanding. I don't know if other folks have an understanding, but that's based on my research and what I've seen, that's where it first started.
Yeah, fantastic. And you mentioned access to the president. I mean, this is actually a really interesting sort of function. We can kind of get a little bit of an understanding as to where the positioning is. It's kind of supporting a senior exec of some type. And that person we perceive as being overly busy. There's too many interrupts coming into that person such that they can't possibly go through all of the things. And presumably the chief of staff is there to intercept that, maybe shuffle the priorities and make sure only the stuff goes only the right stuff goes to the exec. And then the other stuff, presumably, you're going to have to make decisions yourself and decide what that is. So the relationship is almost like a consigliere, let's say, if you want to use sort of the mafioso kind of structure, but it's essentially like maybe a chamberlain, if you want to go back to sort of aristocratic England, where there's a sort of a chief of the household, so to say, and ordering all of the servants around. Is that generally the vibe check? Is that basically where the position sits?
I think so, to a good extent. I can second that. And just generally in the logic, in the organization, you do want to promote up people who make the best decisions, but that's always increases more and more of a scope of what just sits on their lap. And you still want them to be focused on rather making the best decisions in their place. And after a certain level, the amount of things they're dealing with grows beyond just one person, and then chief of staff, and becomes so much more relevant in terms of being able to take as much away off their table to save them for the most crucial decisions and things they need to do.
Yeah, really good observation. People at C, if you have a C in front of your job title, generally speaking, the primary value you offer to the business is executing decisions, making sort of tough decisions. They're not obvious. It's usually a 50-50. It's a decision you need to make. If it's not 50-50, it's not a decision, right? If it's 95% you should do this, guess what? I could do that. It's when it's really narrow, you got to make a call. You got to leverage all of your knowledge and say, okay, we're doing this. That's basically what you pay the big bucks for the C-level to do. However, you think about the interrupts that go to that person, the escalations that go to that person, or the novel circumstances that no one knows who deals with this. Oh, it must be Ben that does that, or must pump it up to Alex. She'll sort it. Something like that. You got to have a buffer. The chief of staff basically intercepts and makes that call. How does so I assume that the kind of the relationship between the C and the chief of staff has got to be the critical relationship, right? Like I'm sure there's other stakeholders you deal with, but there's the one relationship is probably the person you're trying to protect, I guess, if we can use that terminology. How do we sort of possibly recruit for the role then? Is it just literally going to be like, okay, the C person has simply got to know an individual they trust? Or is there a way in which you actually can systematize what are the qualities we need to be a good chief of staff and figure out actually this person would be ideal for it?
Or maybe to intersect that question, Hung, like maybe your journey, like did you join the company in a different role and go into the chief of staff role, or were you hired externally into that role? I think that's what we probably want to know.
Yeah, maybe I could just jump on the first one, because we're actually hiring a chief of staff right now. So maybe I can just give you some kind of context. So if there are any chief of staffs that work within a product and tech organization, please look at our careers site. But there are kind of a few kind of key themes that we're looking at specifically, which is number one, their ability to kind of bust inertia and how they do this. So this could be through decision-making velocity, as an example. The other things we look at is their mental models around prioritization, because there's so much coming at this function and at the C-level at any one time. And then are they willing to challenge when the stakes are high? And this is really important. And then there's the operational kind of lens is, do they promote kind of efficiency mechanisms such as pre-read, asynchronous ways of working, retro, structured debates, things along those lines. So that's the kind of qualities that we're looking for in this role.
Really interesting, Ben. I think those three sort of elements look as if they could be good things to sit on a little bit and just to have a little bit of an understanding. So let's talk about the prioritization aspect. They've got to be like a top-ranked prioritizer as to know what is the most important thing. What is the Teddy Roosevelt? Is it Teddy Roosevelt that has the matrix? You know, what is important and what is high impact or something, or what is difficult, what is high impact? Is that still the default way in which people prioritize, or is there like newfangled things, a newfangled framework where we can understand it a little bit better, or there's new tooling that we use these days to understand what is how we prioritize stuff?
I can jump in. So absolutely, my CEO and I, we use the Eisenhower matrix almost on a daily basis. We would literally have daily sprints in Q1 and Q2 because it was just so hectic. We had at any given time 20 to 30 initiatives, which sounds insane to me. But yeah, we made it work by prioritizing almost every single day to figure out what is the highest priority, what's going to make the most impact, and also with a limited budget, being in a Series A company, what is going to give us the most output for very little. So that's what we use, but I would love to actually know what else other people are using at the moment.
I think maybe just to jump off the back of that, less around kind of what other people are using. I think you've got to know also what can be left to burn. So you're focusing on the most important things, but what are you comfortable to let burn? Obviously, there's the communication that kind of goes with in and around that, but I think that's probably a big thing just to kind of get used to as well, because you are going to be under the spotlight a lot of time.
Yeah, so when you say let burn, I guess you mean this obviously some fires are not going to be put out, right? I mean,
Exactly.
as in any organization, you can't fix everything. I think a big part of maturity of any exec is to understand that and then prioritize again. What are the things that are most important to resolve, and then we're going to just roll forward with what else we've got. So, Alex, you mentioned Eisenhower matrix. I think that was the one I was talking about, not Roosevelt. Eisenhower, can you just describe that for us, for people who might be encountering this for the first time? What does the matrix look like?
Yeah, can I share my screen or?
Sure, you can go ahead and do that. There should be a present thing at the bottom of the of your screen.
I'll just describe it. So basically, there's a matrix that looks like this, and it ranks from not important to high importance, and then urgency. So what's urgent and what's not urgent. So things that are high urgency and very important, do it now. Things that are not so urgent but are important, you got to schedule some time to do it. And my favorite is to delegate. So things that you decide with your CEO that it's not so important but are urgent, that can wait, or it can be delegated to someone else. And then the fourth piece of the matrix is to eliminate. If it's not urgent and it's not important, then get it off your plate, because there's only so much that you can do.
Okay, I love the matrix. Thanks for sharing it, Teddy. Which sort of quadrant do we do first? Do we go with the non-urgent, non-important, and just blast that off? Like, is that the first thing you do, just to get rid, or do you do urgent, important? That's to do it now. Let's do those things, and then all the other stuff can let go. What is your personal sort of approach to this matrix, guys? Evan, let's go to you first on this.
I'm on urgent and important stuff.
Oh, this is muted for some reason. Go ahead, Evan, you might try again.
Yeah, I'm all on about urgent and important stuff. And yeah, I think with things that you're letting burn, there's also an aspect of expectation management with the people, because you have a lot of your principles context, which in a lot of cases would be sensitive and not shared with everyone else. So in that, it becomes more about if anything, enabling people to go on and solve their fires, maybe give them an input on what's your principal's perspective, and then stay focused on the important and urgent things. And then, depending on their mode of operations, I think the second would be either important, non-urgent, or urgent, less important. And in that, I see difference between your principle and what would be your way of prioritizing to, match their working style.
Yeah, interesting. How about you, Teddy? How did you go ahead with this matrix? Like, where did you put your time first, I guess? How did you prioritize the prioritization approach, I guess?
Yeah, I think it totally depends on the context within what you're working within. And what I mean by that is, I worked at a pre-seed and seed stage startup, so we didn't even really have. I actually wish we probably had frameworked it a little bit more. Instead of for us, like we were at a point where we were just growing, scaling, and trying to make sure the business thrived, where it just felt like everything was in the top, was in the left hand side. It was either urgent and had to be done, or it was important but in the future. So to us, it was just more like we were just working within that. So I never actually felt like I had to deal with the other two, but that was only because of the stage of company we're in. I think as the company gets more complex and there's more things, you do learn what Ben was just talking about, right? Which is there are things that are going to drop. But I think at our stage, we didn't even consider the things that were going to drop because we were just so focused on getting the things that needed to be done to get us to Series A. And to continue to grow the company. So that's how we thought about it. Probably could have been more systematized, but at the time we were just so focused on, hey, we got to hire people, we got to grow the business, we got to make sure everything is running on time. And that was kind of the only three goals we actually had. That was like our framework.
Yeah, very, very interesting. I mean, I get the sense that it's always going to be a little bit, a super volatile environment. I mean, there's a little microcosm, I think, between chief of staff and the chief exec or the exec that you're supporting. And outside of that, it's always volatility. It's always stuff that's going on. You've got to just come away and just go through the priority list and blast through. In terms of, go ahead, Ben.
Sorry, just one thing on that is where the decision making needs to come in from the exec is you've got run of business activities that are really important. Let's say things are compliance related. Then you've got company objectives, and then you've got to make a decision on what is a priority based on two different areas. And that's where the decision making comes in. And you, as chief of staff, need to give the context as to why, what are the trade-offs, or what's the risk appetite the business has for each, and then provide a solution or solutions for them to make a decision on.
Yeah, and that relationship needs to be examined as well. You got to challenge the chief exec, don't you? Because you're not just a yes person for it. I mean, it's not like you're just execution version of the chief, right? That person doesn't say do this and then off you go. You've got to be the person that does what exactly? Like align the priorities to what the objectives might be, or something, or the business sort of end goal. Is it your job to basically police that?
I like to think of it in kind of three ways. Firstly is kind of cross-functional alignment. So there are only a few roles in an organization that have horizontal awareness of every single function, or depends how big you are. And the chief of staff can bridge the gaps. The second one's around kind of problem solving. And when you think about cross-functional alignment, this is where they can come in and look at problems and also look at dependency management and then the unintended consequences of if this team solves this, that then has a flow down on X. And then the last is just around kind of general kind of productivity. So planning cycles, execution of initiatives and things along those lines. So they're the kind of real themes that come out from ways of working.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Go ahead, Evan, just say.
Yeah, I'm thinking also on the question of how much do you challenge or keep your principal accountable? And kind of calling back to what Christine said earlier, about executive assistant parts. One thing that's really helped me structure the thinking around the role was it vastly varies based on stage, size, goals of the company and your executive. And depending on those, chief of staff can be actually anything on the range from just executive assistant to basically someone who can substitute executive entirely. Well, if they can do it entirely, probably they will move on to take exactly that role in the future, or they can be very close to it. And then depending on where you are on this range in terms of being able to, be a sub for them in any given situations, also the more meaningful you can be in ability to challenge them and be the sparring partner on those decisions. And as often happens, chief of staff is a kind of transition role in your career when you're preparing for the step up into maybe what your executive is doing.
Very, very interesting.
Just an interesting one on that from Evan is I'm actually running the search for the chief of staff. And within a week, we had 1,500 people apply. And it was everything from EA, project manager, program manager, corporate strategy. And then we had even investor relations folk applying for this job. And there's still maybe a misconception of what this role actually is in the internal or external market for what it actually is for the actual organization. So it's an interesting one for folks to get their head around, for sure.
Is it fair to say that there is like a big status and authority variance with regards to chief of staff? So in other words, there may be some chiefs of staff that are just execution only, or maybe just diary managers, let's say, of the chief exec. That possibly that person might hold that title, but then there's other scenarios where, in fact, the person could be a CEO in waiting, and they're actually, as you say, transitioning through, and maybe an ex-CEO could be amazing as chief of staff. Because they're coming through, they're going to help out, they know what the problems are, and they can blast through. So okay, we have no industry consensus, and we might have like people vastly different backgrounds that think of themselves as chief of staff, and maybe all legitimately. It's all based on the context of what the business is. Yes, very, very interesting indeed. Go ahead, Christine.
Yeah, so I was going to ask, I suppose, really coming from pure play HR and TA, and I think there's a lot of people in the audience here today who are interested in potentially learning a bit more about how do you get there. And, what we've covered so far, you're talking about prioritization, it's frameworks, maybe it's not things necessarily we'll get involved with in the day-to-day, but if someone is keen to pursue that, what would be the top 3 tips? Is it to get to know your CEO more? Is it to learn a bit more about structure in the organization, or looking at things at a more holistic level? What would be the top maybe 1 advice you'd give?
I'll jump in on this if no one else is. It goes without saying, build your development plan around kind of the fundamentals of the role. So from my perspective, the fundamentals are company planning. So understand how this is undertaken from the top down, understand how dependency management works, and then the evolution is how that then translates to your function. So what are the objectives down to the functional initiatives? And then you have financials. So that comes in 2 paradigms. So how is your company budgeting? Then how's your function budgeting, and how does the traction work? And then other elements around that is what are the kind of key financial mechanisms or KPIs that your company is aligning to? So it could be ARR, churn, adoption, could be anything of those lines. But for me, from the people function, is I would target my development plan to each sub-function and make sure I've got awareness across the board. An example is shadowing a people business partner that's running a QBR. So the prep, the presentation, and then the flow down. And then the last thing is to work on a cross-functional program and then own a stream. So once you've kind of got the knowledge and you've built that and you've taken ownership, it's a nice stepping stone into actual execution of a chief of staff role.
Who's that came up with that sort of idea that, a T-shaped kind of skill set would be suitable?
Exactly.
But it strikes me as exactly that, isn't it? You've got to have that sort of awareness to go across the domains and the departments of the business. Obviously, every business is different, so you've got to have that. That's where some context comes in. But then there may be a certain stream that you've emerged from, could be TA, could be engineering, could be whatever it is, where you've got that sort of specialist knowledge having just come through it as you go. That tells me that a lot of these chiefs of staff basically, like they've got a prior career, haven't they? There's no junior chiefs of staff. So you kind of grow in something, and then you go into immediately that position. So you can sort of say there isn't a defined career path in, and maybe not a defined career path out, because it's just a very unique position that sits almost like as a separate thing within the org chart. Is that fair way to describe it?
Yeah, and I can speak more to that because I'm in past my role now with chief of staff. So my career is pretty interesting. I started my career as a consultant within Deloitte. I was actually a human capital consultant. I actually never worked within HR. I always worked around HR. And then I got my MBA, and then I joined a company called Brighthire, which is an interview intelligence software, where I was a product marketing manager. And then I got into MoonHub because I understood this industry. Obviously now at Autoblocks, it's a completely different role. I'm not at I'm at a new level within the AI layer. It's much more developer focused. And I think what's really important as you think about your next role after chief of staff is just what are the things you like doing, but also recognizing that when you're in the chief of staff role, basically 25% of your time is doing a function within an organization. but you should also recognize that you're really building a strong capability within those 25% of your time. And you can think about, hey, which of these things that I've kind of chunked up within my role do I want to do next? And then when you're going through the job process or meeting people, talk about that 25%. And that's how you can kind of go from there. So I've seen everything from chief of staff becoming head of people, becoming head of growth, becoming head of operations, becoming head of legal, and becoming a chief executive. So it really can be anything. It's just more about like, what do you want to talk about and what do you want to focus on? And that's actually part of your own chief of staff development when you're specifically in the role.
Can I ask, Teddy, when you took on that role, chief of staff, was that a very explicit part of the conversation? Hey, we need you to do this particular role now for this moment in the business. But you weren't talking about what's the career progression or whatever it is. You knew it was like, okay, this is the shot. I need to blast this out for 2 years and then move on.
Yeah, I've always talked to when I talked to my principal at the time, I was just saying, I want to become a chief executive at a startup. I didn't say, I knew I wanted to be maybe head of sales, maybe chief of staff, a COO, maybe start my own thing. But it was all around that. But instead, I was like, I'm going to learn for 2 years. I'm going to do everything you need me to do. It doesn't matter what you need me to do, which actually happened. I basically did everything. And I was just more focused on my skills and my development, not as much about the next step. But I did say, hey, like, this is my eventual goal. But while I'm here, I'm just going to learn as much as possible. That's how I kind of thought about my development within the role. I don't know if others have a similar experience.
I love that you said because you want to do your own thing. I wonder if there's a trend here because Guy, who I mentioned earlier, he's gone off and he's actually built his own company that he sold to Shopify, I believe. So I wonder if it's actually someone very entrepreneurial who understands all aspects of the business with the view that they're also learning and honing in their own skill set to go off and build their own projects in the future. Is that actually the career path of a chief of staff as well? I wonder.
In that regard, it might actually be a very modern version of what career pathing really is. It's less about, here's the stepping stones of my career that's been mapped out for me. Here's my 20-year career path. It's about skills acquisition as you move forward, knowledge acquisition, network sort of acquisition as you do it. And that's probably a little bit more compatible with what we understand this future to look like. It's going to be a lot more fluid. It's going to be a lot more self-directed. And there's not going to be that job waiting for you in 2 years' time, right? It's like, hey, of course, I'm going to be the senior of this or head of that. Actually, that function may not even exist by the time you get there. So this is all about self-directed learning. And I think you're right, Christine. It strikes me this is very entrepreneurial, very startup-y. Let's talk about startup-y. It seems that everyone here is kind of in a startup or scale-up. Is it uniquely compatible for that type of hyper-growth type of organization, or are there other contexts where it might suit? So for instance, do I see this in a utilities business where there's a chief of staff working with the CEO or something? Or is it typically housed within the startup sector? What are your thoughts?
I think it depends on the organization again, and the size, the scale, the direction, whether they're going for Series A, whether they're a 200,000 organization. Like I really think it depends on each org.
Absolutely. I actually met at a chief of staff networking event. I met the one of the TikTok chief of staffs, and we were comparing notes on his role versus my role, and they're just so vastly different. Whereas his role is more focused on coordination, exec communications. Mine was on the groundwork, grunting it out, like literally doing anything that's on the list that we need to do. So, I think it just really depends on where you see yourself in your career. Do you want to be on the ground and getting stuff done, or do you prefer to be more cross-functional and more, coordinating, I would say. So how I got into my role, to Christine's question before, is that I joined actually as the head of talent at Continuum. And within 7 weeks, I actually saw that there was a role for Founders Associate on the hiring roadmap. So at the 7-week mark, I thought, I'm just going to shoot my shot. And I reached out to the CEO and just said, look, I know you've got this role, and can I pitch to you? I just want 15 minutes out of your day, and I would like to pitch why I'm the best fit for this role, and why you actually need a chief of staff, not a founder's associate. And we had 2 calls after that, and he called me one afternoon and just said, yeah, let's do it. So to anyone listening, shoot your shot. That's it.
That's great advice, and not only that, but even the sort of way you did that strikes me that that's exactly what, one of the qualities of a chief of staff required, right? It's like this person's going to go forward and try and solve the problem rather than just wait around for something to happen. So you that's the sort of forcing, driving type of personality I think would suit it perfectly well. So great example there, Alex. Go ahead, Ben.
Oh, I was actually just going to say the chief of staff role isn't for everyone. So there are some kind of things to really think about. So there are lots of good. Maybe people can focus on the good after this, but you're going to juggle sensitive topics and team dynamics kind of all at once. You're the one absorbing the pressure and a lot of time emotional responses from others, which can be draining. Not everyone's going to agree with you or act immediately on the things that you need them to do. So you need to be resilient, and this comes out in waves. And you need to find creative ways to kind of solve solutions and influence folk. So I think it's a wicked role. I love it, but it has the other lens that we should really think about as well.
Well, let's talk about that in a moment, because it's considered like a fixer type of role. And whenever you say fixer, I can't stop thinking about organized crime. And it's like, you know what, this guy is he's going to get the thing done no matter what. And it's like, oh my goodness, there's going to be some broken bones on the way here. But before we get there, and by the way, Mike, I'm going to bring you on in a second. He's going to do some talent intelligence for us in terms of like the growth of the role to see whether people actually recruiting for this. But before we do this, I noticed the time we're flying through this session. I want to make sure that Brainfood Live is not a kind of a bottleneck for this conversation. Clearly, there's more to talk about chief of staff, but we've got to come off air in about 10, 15 minutes. So it'd be a terrible thing if we did that and, the conversation ends. So make sure the conversation does not end. The way we do that is to grab your LinkedIn URL, stick it in the chat stream, and then just make sure you connect with everyone who's done the same. If you're watching this on LinkedIn, do the same thing. Grab your LinkedIn URL, stick it in the comment thread, and then connect with everyone who's done that. Bottom line is, that person is interested in this topic. They may be a chief of staff. They may want to be a chief of staff. They may be hiring for a chief of staff. You can start a conversation about this topic with that person. So go ahead and connect with those folks. If you want to continue the chat offline, be my guest. That's exactly what I want you to do. Okay, Ben, let's talk about everybody. Let's talk about the hard stuff. You've got to kind of protect the C person. That means saying no to a lot of people, or at least saying sort it out yourself to a lot of people. Is there a certain personality that's really required here, like an intrinsic attribute, or are there techniques that someone can learn in order to be effective in doing what, fairly confrontational stuff? I think it's fair to say. What are your thoughts? Nature or nurture?
I think different. Yeah, I think different personality types can definitely fit. I mean, I think I see 3 other people on this call who probably have different personality types than me. I think it's less about personality type and more about the things you do. I think one, you always have to be proactive. I'm not sure that is a personality type necessarily, but as Alex just shared, right, like you have to always be willing to speak up. You have to be willing to look around corners. You just have to be really, really proactive. The second thing you probably have to do, and I've seen this across every organization, is be really detail oriented. Again, I'm not sure that's a personality type. I think that's something that you can nurture. But what I've seen across all organizational types is like a lot of what the chief of staff does is keeping those details intact, whether it's at a huge organization or a small organization. Those are the 2 that I've seen across. Otherwise, I've seen, I'm not really creative, but I've seen chiefs of staff that are incredibly creative. I've seen everything like more analytical chief of staffs, more chief of staffs who are better at team harmony, and those who are better at like really cutting through and fixing things, as you said. But I think those are the 2 traits that I've seen across all chief of staffs that I've met personally. I'm not sure, Evan, Ben, and Alex, if you guys have seen any other ones.
Yeah, I love the summary there, Teddy, especially on the detail, right? Because you've got to be on top of everything. You can't be the person that gets surprised by something that occurs. And if it does happen, then you've got to make sure it doesn't happen again, which probably means a conversation with somebody who, either it wasn't as transparent as they could or should have been. So, I think that there is a kind of a willingness to have tough conversations. I think is definitely a component here. Okay, how do we measure performance of chief of staff? How do you know this person is doing a good job? Is that possible? It's not possible.
Yeah, what's the KPIs?
What's the KPI for chief of staff? Like, how do we know this person is doing a good job?
I would say that's one of the cons of the role, is it's very hard to measure performance.
I think it's ultimately down to the trust, isn't it? It's that really intangible thing. Does the C person trust you to do this thing? I suppose you could look at the C-level performance. If you can KPI that guy or that person, like if they're suddenly performing more, they're suddenly, maybe that then translates to business in some way. But I totally get it. It's very difficult to disentangle the function from all of the things that they're involved in. Ben, you've got any thoughts to share on how do you measure performance?
Yeah, I think as you're supporting the C-level, it's tied to your functional objectives, i.e., a KPI is to ship X by X, as an example, or bring in X by X. Your performance is also tied specifically to that, and obviously it's broken down into subcomponents of how you get there, and you and your lead would agree on what those things are. So I don't think there's any kind of general overviews or kind of methodologies to use here. It's pretty much what is the objective of the function or team or whatever you're doing, and how does your role help them get there?
Yeah, interesting. Teddy, you've exited from the role. Were you successful as a chief of staff? Like how you measured, on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would personally, I usually on a quarterly basis set up my own KPIs. Basically, I was like, hey, I had a component of my role that was business development focused. So I was like, hey, I'm going to close a certain amount of deals. I'm going to make sure that I ran all of our company. We were a remote company. I did all of our offsites. I was like, I'll do a successful offsite. I would talk about our high level initiatives. In the end, I think it's trust, right? My principal was a recommender for me. I think that to me is an indication that the role was successful. Is that person going to be an advocate for you? Are other members of the team also advocates for you? I think a lot of what you do as a chief of staff is make sure there's like team cohesion. And so those are kind of I had kind of more like explicit KPIs that I thought I'd hit. And then I had like not as explicit, but more like team oriented, company oriented. I actually found my new role because he knew my founder of my previous company. Like, I think those are the things that indicate that your role was successful. And so, yeah, I personally I think it helped me get my next role. It helped me learn a lot in my career. So I personally think I was successful, and I think the company would say so as well.
Yeah, good stuff. Thoughts, Evan?
My thinking, I'm still kind of stuck on like actually what kind of KPI we can have for ourselves. And one thing that comes to mind is just how many hours of work have you saved for your executive or your executive team? Because ultimately, if what I see as my job is enabling them and reducing the stress and amount of tasks they have to deal with. So also super subjective KPI is how many relaxed days your executive team has because of you.
Yeah, I think that should be like a KPI, presumably, because people grind away, and there's a limited amount of sort of grind that anybody can provide. I think so. So yeah, that's looking after the mental health, if you like, of the C-level. Maybe is something that will evolve in time. It's difficult for that ever to go into KPIs. I think I've not encountered any business yet, but I suspect it will come. Looking after the mental health, the performance. I think in elite sports you have this, where there's a person that's a psychologist that's there to make sure everyone's like on it all the time. But to do that, you've got to have the off time as well. So very, very good. Okay, folks, we're coming to the end of this. But the audience that we're talking to are TA and HR folks. So, they may be looking at this and thinking, you know what, I want to give this a shot. This seems to be a direction of travel I want to go in. Firstly, how do they find the job? I mean, is it like Alex, you got to kind of make the job? It's Ben, sort of your situation might be quite aberrant in the sense you've actually advertised for it and then it's come out. But I wonder whether this is one of those jobs that kind of emerges from other people that kind of creating it. So there's one direction. But how do you prepare for it, and how do you actually convert as a candidate for the job? Like, what kind of things do you need to have in your locker to be able to do it from a TA and HR vertical? Any thoughts on this? Alex, I'll start with you because you've actually done this stepping stone. So maybe the question for you specifically is, how could it have been smoother for you to have made that journey? Like, what was missing in your toolkit before you got the job and you thought, you know what, had I learned this, it would be better for me?
Yeah, absolutely. I think as chief of staff, you're sitting in board meetings and you're dealing with very complex financial models. And so I didn't have that in my remit. I come from a people and talent background, a bachelor in business. So I didn't really have a lot of the technicals, and also going into a role that was in a very technical business. So for me, I went out and joined a it's called Baby VC. If anyone is interested, I can send you more about it. But it was basically a crash course on VCs and how they work and what they're looking for and all the metrics that VCs look for. And looking at it from that perspective, then I could talk to the board, what they want to hear and what would be interesting to them. So kind of like going back to first principles, what do people actually, what is the actual problem and what do people want to hear? So I do that for everything. And it's kind of helped me build out my skill set over the years.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, obviously understand where your vertical is and you got to expand beyond that. Step number one. Evan, let's go to you. I mean, I think, did you come from a TA background before moving into this? I can't remember.
Yeah, my story is a TA background, mostly in tech, then people partnering role for several years at Pleo, being very close to product teams. And I think throughout that journey, the things that ended up being most relevant in transitioning into chief of staff role was really embedding yourself in the business and making sure you understand the entire scope and what matters to company beyond just your remit. Because then when the opportunity for chief of staff in product area came up, I was relevant without having the usual skill set for the role, but rather having deep knowledge of how company works, how product works, and just plainly history of every single team in the org, which is relevant to a lot of things that rather come with this role. And I struggle to imagine interviewing for the role. And how I would structure and design the interview process, because it's having deep trust with your principal and also with stakeholders is key to being successful in that. And if anything, is one of the main things, main competences, but you cannot have them in just a new company. And that's why often someone would be recommended as this high integrity person, and then they build the trust being in the role. But if it's pre-existing, that definitely makes the whole thing much easier, but also makes it much more network dependent, rather a job that you can shoot for out there.
Yeah, really, really interesting. I love the idea of getting embedded in the business. This is like the CEO, like getting on the delivery bike and delivering some food. Like, learn the business. If you think chief of staff is kind of like a proto CEO or almost a substitute CEO, you've got to have that mentality. You can't be locked in your ivory tower. Ben, let's go to you on this because you're actually hiring for this role. So you've got it up and running. So how are you assessing candidates? Like,
we're mid flow, so I kind of prefer to answer this question in about a week. If I was being really open with you, so if we could I gave you the kind of key themes that we're looking at, but if I don't mind sharing what we did in our process in a week's time. Please.
Yeah, well, we'd love to get you back on this because I think it'll be fast. Because I think it's got to be so difficult because it's you know what you want, but the backgrounds of everyone is so different. Mm-hmm. Like, how do you do it in a practical way? Very, very difficult. Mm-hmm. Okay, Teddy, let's go to you on this. Advice for someone listening to this who wants to get into this role from a TA background. What would you say?
Yeah, I have this unique thing where I haven't been in TA. I've been working around talent, but never been in TA. What I would say is I would check out the chief of staff posting and where the company is. And I think Alex has a perfect example where companies that usually are starting to build out their talent teams are also starting to build out and think about their chief of staff role in their operations. There tends to be a correlation there because I think it is when the company is scaling and bringing on a lot of people, you start to tend to think about having a chief of staff as well as a talent person. And I think one thing to be aware of is if you're in talent or you're within a company, either look at the chief of staff job posting. They usually do have something talking about talent. And I think as a person in talent, I think there's a lot of skills and capabilities that work for the chief of staff role. So all that to say is like, think about what are the skills that you can port over from the talent world to being a chief of staff while also still talking about, hey, I can do these other things within talent as a chief of staff. I don't know if that made sense, but like, I just think there's a lot of complementary skill sets and there's also a way to pitch yourself for like a talent role and to be chief of staff, which it sounds like is similar to what Alex kind of did. And that's what I would recommend.
Yeah. And the more I talk to you guys, the more I realize that actually just kind of training yourself in the chief of staff mentality is going to be good for your career regardless, because it's going to give you that like wider view of how a business works. It's not like it's going to ever be bad for you to get some cognizance of what this job is all about. Okay, listen, I'm going to bring on Mike Sandiford here. He's going to show us a little bit about what the market is looking like for chief of staff's role, but it does mean I'm going to have to kick some people out because I think the plan I've got on Crowdcast only allows 6 people. So I want to say goodbye to everyone here, I'm afraid to say. Christine, you stay with us. But Evan, thank you so much for joining us on stage and sharing your knowledge. Really interesting to hear from you. Teddy, thanks for joining us as well from New York. Wonderful to get your perspective. Alex, great to see you. Thank you so much for joining as well. Great to hear your amazing story and getting yourself into that role as well. Fantastic and inspirational stuff. And Ben, thanks for coming on and juggling sort of logistics and all the rest of it. I think you look as if you're in some sort of storage cupboard right now.
Yeah. I found a quiet place at an airport. So you're fine.
That's it. I know you're at the airport. Safe flight, Ben.
Oh,
and thanks for joining me.
Thanks.
Cool. Let's bring on Mike. Christine, hang around if you got time. Mike's. I asked Mike he's from Horsefly, and I asked him to basically do a bit of a searching for us as to what the cheat, like, is it a growth role? What's going on? Hey, Mike, how you doing, mate?
Good, buddy. How you doing?
I'm well. Sorry to keep you waiting. I meant to drop you in earlier, and then I forgot about you. And then I realized, Mike's here. I better bring him on.
That's fine. I'm the afterthought. It's okay. No, look,
you're an afterthought.
There's listen, really interesting chat, and again, because I've only got a few minutes as well. But I think that was a really interesting chat. Let me just share my screen because I don't know, how can I share my screen, Hung? How do I do that?
Bottom of the screen, there should be a present button.
Yeah,
and just push that.
Screen. Okay, cool. I'm just going to share a couple of bits because, again, I think what's really interesting is kind of hearing from the panel that you've had on in terms of that startup business. If I put chief of staff in the Horsefly, for some context for those on Horsefly, we aggregate data globally for across the whole labor market. So we're always going to pull out kind of the top businesses that are using this job title. So what candidates are working for these businesses? And I think when your chat came up on Brainfood, there was that whole kind of, where are people stereotypically working? And this is saying, look, British Army, MOD, Royal Navy, Foreign Commonwealth Office. There is a real, and I forget whether it was Teddy talking about over in the US that actually it came from sort of the government office. And I think that there is quite clearly, you can kind of see, now it's not completely limited to that. You're seeing likes of City, HSBC, and what got me really thinking today when looking at this, and again, if I even go to say, hey, let's look at job titles, for example, there are a range of different job titles here where there could be cross-transferable skill sets. So deputy director, deputy head, chief of staff, vice chair, very much so that people that are on here are making big decisions. They're next in line, if you like, to a CEO. But actually, what I can actually do here, and you said, okay, what about a career pathway of a chief of staff? Now, we're only going to show perhaps the top 5. But interestingly, so we've got a commanding officer, operations manager, a project manager, a business manager. So and actually you said that is there a there isn't a junior chief of staff? No, but there's a deputy, Hung. So you've been called out ever so slightly there that you could be a deputy chief of staff as perhaps a career pathway in there, which is just at the very bottom there. So, look, I think the interesting thing as we talk about sort of talent intelligence, it comes back to the skills. It comes back to, what does that role actually mean in any organization? And actually, if you're in TA, what are the skills that you have? And maybe look at the skills that are sat within, a chief of staff type role. And again, I can kind of look at kind of some of the bits here that are being advertised. These are some of the skills that people are talking about. And again, there's some really clear skill set in here of ownership, discretion, planning, financial. So, yeah, and actually I did do the US as well, just because I don't want to share this tab instead. So have a quick look. And again, I think testament, we can kind of get candidate numbers, salaries, adverts, and then the businesses again of where the most, the largest sort of number of people that are actually working at those organizations.
Really, really interesting, Michael. Thank you very much for that. And yeah, the military and the government seems to be where these jobs have, the job itself has tenure, so to say. It's established in there, probably knows what that job is. I do wonder how that translates into private sector. It'd be very interesting to speak to people that have operated as chief of staff in the military or in the government and then moved to private sector. What are the differences there? Maybe that's a part two. But Mike, I know you got to go, so I'll let you go. Thank you so much for sharing. Horsefly Analytics, by the way, if you're interested in some of that jazz, make sure you take a look at it. Talent intelligence. You can't do this job today without using talent intelligence. Speak to Mike Basson at Sandyford for that. Mike, have a good weekend.
You too.
Cool.
Thanks, Benny. See you soon.
Christina, thank you for hanging on.
Great topic.
Great chat.
Yeah,
fancy it? Fancy chief of staff?
You know what? Like, as you're thinking about the next steps, initially, yes. But it's also, like everyone mentioned, it's different in the business that you're at, right? So the more I think about it and where I am at the moment, probably not at the moment. It's interesting because you think it's abundantly clear for me, right? Because in TA and HR, you're solely focused on the people. You're dealing with the CFO, and then you're like flying the flag for your department or for your team. Whereas a chief of staff role has to have their fingers in every single department and oversee the entire thing, which a CEO might not be able to. So it's really it's ensuring that you understand how each department works. And admittedly, I don't really know how my R&D team works, so I'm probably not quite there yet.
Do you reckon you could do it?
Maybe more from a TA and ops perspective. And I think one thing that's also emerging from this conversation as well, how do you balance the operational part with the prioritization part and, stakeholder management? There's so many kind of different facets there.
I think you gotta be off business as usual. I don't think you can't have operational responsibility.
Yeah.
You gotta just literally be saying yes, no, maybe. And I do disagree with Teddy. I think you gotta be a bit of a hard ass to do it. I don't think.
Well, I think also the key thing about holding a mirror up against the leadership team in terms of what's happening with your organization, right? I think that is a hard pill to swallow sometimes when you're like, okay, this is what I see that's happening across all the different departments. Like, what do you mean? So you really have to have that personality to push back. And if you don't, then it's probably not one for you.
Yeah, I'm conflict averse, so I ain't gonna make it. There's no.
I was like, come join us. We're the fun company. We're the culture and people side, not the holding the mirror up side. But yeah,
that's it.
Yeah, I think it's very personality driven, but it's definitely fascinating and it's great to hear. I think in our world we hear people going to COO roles, commercial director roles, so it's good to know that there's also another path, and it's not one that's necessarily spoken about a lot.
There's a pathway, and as I'm just thinking about it, I know we all know personalities that we think, yeah, it will suit this person, and they are tougher individuals than I am. People that are prepared to break eggs and break eggs and break legs, let's say. So yeah, very, very interesting. Anyway, that's it, everyone. Hope you enjoyed the show. Super long. We'll be back next week. I think it's bank holiday weekend, so enjoy that. We're back next week, and we're going to do a comparison on automation and AI in terms of our agencies, RPOs, and in-house use artificial intelligence. Where the heck are we? Is RPO ahead of everyone? Is agency ahead of everyone? We're going to find that out in next week's show. Make sure you join for that. It's up and running. Follow the channel if you're interested in more chat like this. Thanks for watching, everybody, and have a good weekend.
Happy Friday.
See you later.